Now, for this next section of the right-hand toolbar, I'm going to create a test geometry. And there's a lot of very helpful test geometries in Houdini that you can use for various purposes. They're basically built as a starting ground for testing. You know, if you're testing your systems and you want a specific setup piece of geometry, you can do that. I'm going to create my absolute favorite inside of Houdini. I think it's everyone's favorite. It's the pig head, this beautiful monstrosity right here. We're going to work with this for the next section, because right here we have something that is on by default. And if you hover over it, you'll see what it is. It says display material on objects. Now, this object, the way that it's constructed in its internals, right, it has a material already assigned to it. So that's why we're seeing it in the viewport versus just if I created a sphere, it has no texture, it has no UVs, it's like not set up for it. But this test geometry is pre-set up with all of these things. So we can see its material here, but there are times where we don't want to be encumbered by seeing the material. And so this button right here will toggle that on and off. A sibling to this button is the one down here, which visualizes the actual UVs. It creates a very helpful grid pattern that lets us understand kind of how our UVs are divided. Again, this is something we are going to go into great detail on in the future, but in order to have a material tethered to your object in any sensical way, the object needs to have UVs to tell it how to apply that material, right? It's okay if that doesn't make sense now. Point is, if I turn off the material and I toggle this on, we will see, well, I see nothing. Okay, so I'll click and hold, and I'll actually let go on UV grid gray. Or UV color. Okay, we're having some weird glitch here. That's okay. Typically, if you toggle that, it'll show up, but I'm kind of glad you saw that, because if it doesn't, just go ahead and click and hold, and then just reset it by selecting something different. These are all just different visual variations of the same thing, but we can see the grid pattern that I'm talking about. This is how the UVs are constructed. Now, you can have these both on at the same time. This is not how it should look. This is as good as time as any. Sometimes the scene view will jank the heck out. It's very strange. It doesn't happen nearly as much as it used to, at least in my experience. But if this ever happens, you can reset the viewport very easily. By going up to this Labs tab, you can just click Reset Viewport. And now it'll basically relaunch the whole thing and say, okay, I don't know where we got lost there, but let's start over. Why don't we start this relationship over again, keep it healthy. So now you can see, yeah, you can have both active there at the same time. It doesn't really matter. Again, these are just visibility preferences. So what else do we have down this right-hand side? Well, we have some very helpful visual displays. Now, you've heard me talk about visualizers a bunch to this point, right, with the handles and whatnot. Working in Houdini is predicated largely on being able to understand the information that you're looking at, right? And there are so many ways to do that, and there are so many different visualizers that you can even make to make sense of your scene. And right out the gate, there are some helpful ones that they have prepared for us. One is display points, right? This is comprised of lots of different points, but I can't see any of those points. The other geometry is in the way, so how do I know, right? If I go into select mode and I press 2, I can see those points. But what if I want to see those points while I have the transform tool active? Well, by clicking display points, that visualizes the points no matter what, right? It will prioritize the visualization of the points in the mesh, which is very helpful. If we go down, we have display normals. As a quick overview of what normals are, I'll give you my rendition of how I like to think of them. It's basically directional information from the surface that is conveying to the lights in the scene what direction the light should bounce, kind of conveying which direction is out. So if we create a normal node here, this will generate normals. Let's just change abnormals to points for the sake of this visualization. Now, if we click this visualizer button for display normals, we will see, oh look, there are normals that are pointing essentially out and away from the surface. We'll use these a ton, but this is a very quick and easy way that we can visualize what our normals currently are, right? We can visualize our points and our normals. We can also visualize point trails. Point trails are essentially the opposite of the way normals are constructed. Normals point in the direction that they're aiming, whereas trails point in the direction that they just were. Where is this useful? Well, if we add some motion, so let's keyframe animate our pig here. Move it over here. We've got some motion there. The point is not the animation here. The point is that it is moving, right? And if we then create a trail node to create some velocity, basically what we are doing is we're computing where it was in the previous frame, where each point was in the previous frame, and are calculating a velocity value for that. We can visualize that with this trails button right here, display point trails. So what you're seeing is where we came from, which is helpful. Now, if I increase this value, just so we can see it, if I make it way more dramatic, moving way, way faster, you'll see that the point trails have gotten bigger too, right? They are essentially showing exactly where those points were the previous frame before, which is good when we're trying to navigate motion blur and we're trying to navigate other things in Houdini. So just know this is how to display point trails. You can also visualize the point numbers. This will become very important down the line. But each point has a unique number that is associated with it. It's how Houdini tracks all the data and information that's going on in the scene. We can visualize that with this. Down here, we can also display the primitive numbers, right? They also have associated number values. So Houdini knows what to do with those as well, because remember, the points, the vertices, and the polygons are all separate entities that are working together to create this geometry, but they all have their own unique identification, so Houdini knows what is what. And then the other major thing that I use all the time is this right here, visualization. This tab we will go into as we actually create things in our scenes. By right-clicking on this, we can see a lot of gobbledygook that probably doesn't make any sense to us right now. But just know that this tab is to toggle on and off the custom visualizers that we make. Because again, these are all presets for our pleasure, so to speak. But we may want to create custom ones to visualize in the way that we want to visualize, because we are free entities up in Houdini. So this is how we toggle that on and off once we've created them. So we will definitely play with that quite a bit moving forward. Would you believe me if I told you this was just the tip of the iceberg? Do you remember up here in the shelf where I click the plus button and all of a sudden there's a whole bunch of other shelves that aren't visible? Well, the same is true for the display settings, right? We've got all of these options here that are pertinent and important, and that's why they're promoted to the surface for us to interact with in this way. If you select the scene view and you press D, we get a pop-up of our display options, right? These are these. How do we know that, for example? Well, if we check to show point numbers in here, we can see that the point numbers toggle activates here. These are interconnected. A lot of these are interconnected. The normals are interconnected. The point visibility is interconnected. But we also have access to a whole host of additional controls that we don't on the toolbars, right? Just due to space, real estate, really. One of the most important is in the background tab here. You can even see that these are organized very nicely. Markers, guides, geometry, scene, camera, like these display controls are organized in a way that makes finding them very, very simple. But there's a great deal of flexibility that exists. For example, one of the major ones that I use all the time is in the background tab. We have the color scheme of the display section. If you are working with white smoke and you have a light background, oftentimes it makes it difficult to judge the density of that smoke in the window. So you can easily change from a color scheme of light to dark, right? Or gray, or, you can even customize if you want to get real fancy with it. I don't do that myself, but point is there's a ton of options in the display pop-up that we can use to further help visualize our scene. I'll give you one more example. If we drop another sphere down, I'm actually going to go inside this and I am going to add an add node, which has this very helpful toggle where I can delete all the geometry but keep the points. So, basically point is I just want the points from this sphere for now. I'm going to toggle off this visibility here and just see the points as they are in the scene. Now let's say I want to make these points more visible, for example. Well, there's no options on the right-hand side for that, but I know that in the display options in the geometry tab, I have control over the particles themselves, at least how they're visualized. So here we have display particles as points, and then we have a point size. By clicking and dragging this, I can actually increase the size of the points in my scene. If I have a massive point simulation that we'll see later, we may not want to visualize them as points at all because the points are too big and doesn't give us a good understanding of the shape and dimensionality of our simulation, in which case we can change the actual display to, instead of being points, be no bigger than pixels. Now, right now I don't have nearly enough, but if you have enough particles stacked on top of each other, visualizing them as pixels instead of points is very, very helpful in understanding what we're looking at. So just be aware, we don't need to know a great deal of this right now. We will use it sparingly throughout the duration of this course, and you'll start to pick up little tricks along the way, but just know that this is here, right? A deeper well of display control for us in terms of navigating the information inside of our scene view.
If you enjoyed this video and you want to learn more, head to doublejumpacademy.com/Jordan for the full course. Links in the description. You're just a click away.